Tonight, we stand beneath the quiet light of a museum room, where a small clay tablet rests behind glass. It is not gold, nor is it crowned with jewels. It is brown, cracked, and no larger than a hand. Yet its surface carries marks made by someone who lived almost 4,000 years ago, in a land of reeds, mud brick, temple smoke, and slow brown rivers. During excavations at the ancient city of Nippur, archaeologists working with the University of Pennsylvania recovered a fragmentary tablet describing humanity, cities before a great flood, and a world watched over by divine powers. Oxford scholars later helped make many Sumerian literary works readable to modern audiences, translating lines pressed into clay by vanished scribes. What survives is real. The tablets are real. Their silence is real as well. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the room grows quieter around you, leave your location and your local time below. There is something pleasing about imagining many listeners scattered beneath different skies, entering the same ancient darkness together. You lean closer to the glass. The tablet does not immediately reveal secrets. It does not announce 5 lost species in neat order, like a careful list written for a modern documentary. Ancient records are rarely that courteous. They arrive broken, smoke-stained, copied centuries after their first composition, and filled with beings whose boundaries seem deliberately uncertain. Gods behave like rulers. Monsters stand like symbols. Sages rise from the water. Humans appear only when an older order has already grown tired. That is where the unease begins. The oldest cities of southern Mesopotamia rise from a landscape made of water and silt. You feel the heat resting heavily over the plain. Canals shimmer beneath a pale sun. Date palms tremble slightly in the wind. Somewhere, sandals scrape against dried clay, while a reed boat slips quietly along a channel carrying barley, wool, and fish toward a city wall. There are no mountains here to give a settlement grandeur, no cliffs, no deep forests. Only earth continually threatened by water, and water continually forced into order by human hands. A canal neglected for one season silts up. A levee left weak can break. A field without labor becomes dust or marsh. In such a world, order does not feel natural. Order feels borrowed. Sumerian scribes understood this deeply. Their tablets record offerings, taxes, fields, livestock, beer rations, temple workers, and the measured habits of daily survival. Records confirm that writing first served practical needs in the growing cities of Mesopotamia, long before it became a vessel for elaborate stories about beginnings. A sheep must be counted. Grain must be measured. A worker must receive what is owed. Even civilization begins with someone checking the storage room, which is perhaps the least glamorous mystery of all. Yet, over time, the same wedges pressed into clay begin to speak about matters that cannot be weighed. They describe the heavens separated from the earth. They speak of divine councils, sacred cities, floods, rulers, and the making of humankind. You can almost sense a scribe pausing over the damp tablet, lifting his stylus, considering how to give shape to a time no living person remembered. Long before recorded history, the Sumerians imagined existence already crowded. This is the detail that draws you onward. Humanity is not standing at the beginning of their sacred stories. Humanity arrives within a world already occupied by powers, duties, conflicts, and arrangements older than human breath. The first people are not the owners of creation. They enter late, under conditions they did not choose, among presences they did not invent for themselves, and from this single impression, modern minds have built many strange palaces. There are people today who look at these tablets and claim they reveal forgotten biological races, visitors from distant worlds, or 5 literal species erased before humans took control of the earth. Some point to divine figures with wings, animal features, or shining crowns. Some gather names from separate texts and arrange them into a secret sequence. It is a curious habit of the modern world that fragments make us more confident, not less. A broken tablet can become a doorway, but you remain careful as you pass through it. The Sumerian records do contain different classes of beings. They speak of great gods who command, lesser divine workers who labor, culture-bearing figures connected with wisdom, protective creatures carved at entrances, and shadowy generations belonging to an earlier cosmic order. These are ancient categories of imagination and belief, not a scientific catalog of vanished animals. Their disappearances may mean death, defeat, withdrawal, transformation, replacement, or simply the changing attention of worshippers. Still, a question lingers. Why did so many Sumerian stories imagine a populated world before humanity? Scholars continue to debate how closely these compositions reflect older oral traditions, temple ritual, political authority, or the ordinary anxieties of people living beside dangerous rivers. A myth copied onto a tablet may preserve beliefs already centuries old, or it may shape the past to explain a present filled with work, hierarchy, and unpredictable disaster. The clay gives you voices, but rarely gives you certainty. For a moment, the museum air seems warmer. You notice the faint scent of polished wood and dust. Though your mind has already traveled far beyond the glass case, you are now standing near Nippur, or perhaps Uruk, while evening settles over flat roofs. A cooking fire glows within a courtyard. Someone pours beer through a reed. Somewhere beyond the homes, a temple rises above the city, pale in the final light. Inside that temple, the world is not empty. There are carved eyes watching from statues. There are offerings laid down carefully before unseen recipients. There are hymns murmured by priests who believe the city depends upon delicate agreements between mortals and powers older than kings. Even the smallest figurine, hands folded in patient devotion, seems to say that human beings have entered a story already in motion. One particularly odd idea attaches itself to the imagination. In later retellings, certain water-linked sages are pictured as mysterious teachers who brought knowledge into human settlements, and some modern storytellers treat them like survivors from an earlier race. The image is irresistible, a silent figure emerging at dawn from dark water, carrying the secrets of bricks, numbers, seed grain, and stars. Yet the surviving evidence is more elusive, more poetic, and perhaps more interesting because it refuses to behave like proof. You begin to understand the real mystery. It is not simply whether 5 species once walked the mudflats before people appeared. It is why an early civilization, so skilled in counting grain and measuring fields, also preserved stories in which humanity seems almost secondary. Their world does not open with human triumph. It opens with older beings, older obligations, and a deep sense that life is inherited from forces never fully understood. The clay tablet remains still behind the glass. Nothing moves upon its surface. Nothing whispers from its broken edges. Yet its marks preserve a disturbing tenderness. The first cities did not imagine themselves alone. They imagined themselves arriving late, waking beneath ancient skies, stepping carefully into duties left waiting for them. And somewhere within those cracked lines, 5 different kinds of presence begin to gather, not yet as answers, but as shapes in the dark. Your eyes leave the tablet and settle upon an older landscape, one with no walls rising above it, no market cries, no temple drums, and no smoke drifting from household ovens. The plain is unmeasured. The ground has not yet been persuaded into fields. Nothing has been planted in deliberate rows. No boundary stone tells one family where its earth ends and another family's earth begins. There is water everywhere, not the cheerful water of a garden channel, flashing beneath sunlight and carrying fallen petals. This water is deeper in the imagination, heavier, almost without direction. It lies beneath everything like an enormous, sleeping thought. In the Sumerian sacred world, the beginning is not a clean, empty darkness waiting to be filled. It is a moist, hidden depth, a place of fertility and danger, where creation gathers quietly before taking form. You hear no voice at first, only the slow movement of unseen currents, and perhaps the soft breathing of reeds not yet claimed by human hands. The sky seems low, dim, and unfinished. Mud glistens beneath a faint gray light. Each shallow pool reflects nothing more certain than drifting cloud. The familiar earth has not yet become a home. It is only possibility, damp and patient. One ancient composition describes the wise god, Enki, resting within the deep freshwater realm, a hidden place whose interior no other divine being fully knows. Beside this image stands Nama, the primeval mother, associated with the waters from which senior gods emerge. In those surviving lines, the world begins not with trumpets or flames, but with a sleeping presence in flowing water, while divine need slowly rises around him. That detail feels strangely intimate. Even divine existence begins with complaint. The gods experience weariness. They carry burdens. They find themselves trapped within tasks that must somehow be made easier. There is gentle comfort in discovering that even celestial beings, according to ancient storytellers, can reach the point where somebody really must speak to management. Yet the waters themselves remain solemn. To people living in southern Mesopotamia, water could never be a simple decoration in a story. The rivers brought the silt that nourished barley fields and fed entire cities. They also shifted, flooded, swallowed paths, spoiled harvests, and reminded each generation that fertile life stood very close to ruin. Archaeological surveys of the southern plain show settlements growing through careful control of waterways, branches, basins, and canals. Water gave order its chance, while always retaining the power to take order away. So, in the sacred imagination, the watery beginning is not childish fantasy. It is the deepest truth of the landscape translated into story. Everything useful rises from dangerous abundance. Everything stable must be drawn carefully from something unstable. A city of brick, grain, and human voices is only mud arranged against uncertainty. You step through that uncertain mud now. It presses coolly between your toes. The air carries the smell of wet earth, salt reeds, and distant rain. No cattle move across the marshland. No fisherman tests a net. A heron might seem possible, standing alone in a silver pool, but even that quiet shape belongs to a world whose rules have not yet been announced. The Sumerian beginning is difficult to recover in one complete tale. Their writings do not offer a single orderly book that starts with the first moment and patiently explains everything. Instead, separate compositions preserve glimpses. One poem speaks of a distant time when heaven had been separated from earth. Another places divine figures within the freshwater deep. Another gives human beings and cities a place in a world already directed by divine decision. The fragments do not assemble themselves. Modern scholars still discuss whether Sumerian creation ideas formed one consistent tradition, or whether different temples preserved different sacred visions shaped by local worship. A priestly school devoted to a water god may naturally imagine wisdom flowing from hidden depths. A city honoring another power may arrange the beginning differently. The tablets offer a family of beginnings, not a single locked door with one key, and that uncertainty makes the silence wider. You stand in a world with no ordinary human witness. There is no farmer to look upward and name the clouds. There is no child to collect a shell from the riverbank. There is no elderly woman grinding grain beside a doorway while telling stories she heard in youth. Human memory has not begun. Human labor has not begun. Human sorrow has not begun. Still, something is present. The ancient texts describe the world as active before people appear. The divine order is not waiting for humans to give it meaning. Water exists with personality and sacred depth. Heaven and earth require arrangement. Divine generations possess relationships, needs, and tensions. The universe is already occupied, already busy, already carrying its own unfinished responsibilities. This is the first unsettling curve in the path. In many modern habits of thought, human beings place themselves naturally at the center. Landscapes seem to matter because people inhabit them. Rivers become important because people drink from them. Stars become meaningful because people observe them. Yet the Sumerian imagination gently turns that assumption over. The waters matter first. The divine order moves first. Humanity arrives within an ancient arrangement that has never required human permission. A quirky image survives from the broader Mesopotamian world. Wisdom is often imagined not descending from a bright mountaintop, but rising from wet depths, marsh edges, and the concealed realm beneath flowing water. Knowledge comes with damp hems, so to speak. It smells less of polished marble than of fish, river weed, and a basket left too long near the bank. You can almost smile at that. A later civilization may prefer a philosopher in clean robes beneath an olive tree. The southern plain offers something more practical and stranger wisdom emerging where feet sink. Mosquitoes complain, and the entire future of agriculture depends upon whether the canal behaves itself. It is hard to remain grand for long in a marsh. Perhaps that is why marshes are so good at preserving humility. The dim light changes above you. A boundary appears where no boundary had seemed possible. The sky seems to lift, not violently, but with the immense slowness of a curtain rising in a room too large to measure. Beneath it, the earth gains weight and texture. Mud banks emerge. Channels deepen. Open water divides itself into paths. The silent world begins to acquire structure, though it does not yet resemble safety. Somewhere beneath the forming land, the deep freshwater realm remains hidden. It is not destroyed by order. It becomes the unseen reservoir beneath it, the secret region from which abundance, wisdom, and danger continue to rise. Even when walls eventually stand firm and lamps burn inside homes, the first water will still be there in imagination, underneath every foundation. Perhaps that is why the oldest sacred stories feel so quiet. They do not insist that beginnings must be bright. They permit creation to begin in dampness, uncertainty, sleep, and a low murmur beneath the earth. They suggest that existence may take shape gradually, as a riverbank takes shape, one soft layer at a time. You remain beside the unclaimed water, listening. The surface hardly stirs. The air tastes cool and mineral. far out across the shadowed wetland. No human torch answers the fading sky. The world is not empty, but it is not yours. It belongs to older depths, patient forces, and presences still gathering names within the darkness. A cool darkness gathers over the plain, and the damp ground begins to feel less vacant. The silence has acquired a shape. Far above, the sky hangs like a vast woven cloth, heavy with stars still hidden behind cloud. Beneath your feet, earth waits without roads, without doors, without the familiar marks of settled life. Yet between sky and soil, ancient presences now begin to emerge. They are not creatures walking in herds. They are not animals waiting to be named. They belong to a stranger category, the first remembered powers within the Sumerian imagination, vast enough to represent parts of existence itself. The primeval mother is called Nama. You do not see her entering through a temple gate, dressed in splendid robes. You feel her as depth, as coolness, as the unseen source beneath the surface. She belongs to the first waters, the hidden abundance from which the senior gods are said to arise. Her presence is less like a person approaching and more like moisture gathering in the night air, silently touching every stone. Oxford's electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature preserves a composition in which Nama is described as the primeval mother who gave birth to the senior gods. The wording matters. In this ancient vision, divine life has ancestry. The gods do not merely appear as finished rulers. They emerge through generations, with origins lying behind them like dark water behind a reed bank. You let that thought settle slowly. Above the damp earth stands An, the distant sky god, associated with the great height arching over creation. His world is elevated, still, and difficult to approach. You imagine looking upward until your neck aches, seeing only a pale sweep of sky turning gradually toward midnight. A deity of that height does not need to shout. Distance itself becomes his authority. Below him lies Kai, the earth, fertile and weighty, the patient ground receiving seed, rain, footsteps, and burial. In Sumerian thought, heaven and earth were once remembered as joined, then separated so that an ordered world could unfold between them. The image is simple, almost domestic, like lifting a heavy roof above a crowded room. Yet it opens a space large enough for weather, fields, cities, and every uncertain human hope. Between these enormous parents, a younger power gains importance. Enlil is wind, breath, command, and the restless force moving through the opened world. You cannot hold wind in your hand, but you know when it arrives. It slips through reeds. It carries dust along baked ground. It presses against a door panel during the night and makes even a safe house seem briefly uncertain. For Sumerian worshippers, a power that separated heaven from earth and directed destiny was not decorative. He stood at the center of order. At Nippur, Enlil's temple became one of the most significant sacred centers in ancient Mesopotamia. Excavations conducted by the University of Pennsylvania uncovered parts of the city whose religious importance endured for centuries. Kings ruling far away still sought legitimacy through the holy standing of Nippur. A god of moving air had acquired something remarkably earthly influence: property, priests, offerings, and political consequence. Even eternity develops administration. You walk toward an imagined sanctuary as twilight deepens. The outer walls are built from clay brick, smoothed by skilled hands and marked by long seasons of heat. A bronze fitting catches the last dim glow. The courtyard smells of dust, oil, and faint curls of incense. Somewhere inside, Bread is placed before an unseen recipient. Beer is poured with care. A hymn rises softly, not because the singer expects an answer in ordinary speech, but because the city understands itself to be listening. Here, the older divine powers are not gone. They have become remote. Nama remains at the source, yet few grand temples rise loudly in her name, and remains above the world. Yet younger gods receive more vivid stories, urgent petitions, and intimate devotion. Ki lingers in the very ground beneath every offering, but divine attention increasingly gathers around powers who govern weather, fertility, love, war, craft, justice, and the daily hazards of survival. Disappearance, in such a tradition, does not always mean destruction. A god can recede without dying. A first generation can remain necessary while becoming distant, folded quietly into origins, genealogies, ceremonial phrases, and the solemn authority of old names. The grandmother of a household may speak less during a crowded feast, yet every guest still sits within the family she helped create. Ancient divinity can fade in precisely this manner. A peculiar little detail hides inside the larger grandeur. Mesopotamian gods, despite commanding the universe, are often imagined enjoying meals and drink in their sanctuaries. In one Sumerian account, divine figures sit together while beer and liquor circulate in shining vessels. It is charmingly strange. The powers of sky, wind, and deep water are not forever fixed in majestic poses. At times, they resemble a solemn household discovering that a feast has improved everyone's mood. The image softens them, but only slightly, for the divine family is also a structure of succession. Senior figures yield attention to active rulers. Distant origins give way to powers who make decisions, organize territories, and receive the anxious prayers of cities. This is not a peaceful retirement in any modern sense. It is the quiet rearrangement of sacred importance. One generation settling into the background while another steps into the lamp glow. Some modern readers treat this fading as evidence of vanished races. They imagine an earliest species withdrawing from the earth, leaving younger beings to occupy their abandoned stations. The tablets do not state such a history. Their world is theological and poetic, shaped by temple memory rather than biological observation. Yet the interpretation persists because the ancient pattern is undeniably haunting. The eldest presences are there at the beginning. Then their voices become harder to hear. Researchers still disagree about how much these divine generations preserve very ancient Sumerian belief, and how much reflects later scribal arrangement. Was Nama once more central in living worship than the surviving tablets suggest? Did different cities place different powers at the beginning? Were genealogies created to bring competing temples into one sacred family? The fragments offer enough to see a pattern, but not enough to watch its first creation. You stop at the threshold of the sanctuary. Cold clay brushes your fingertips. From somewhere within comes the muted beat of a drum, slow enough to resemble the pulse felt against a pillow in deepest night. Above the roofline, the sky is now black and wide, and seems present there, immense and withdrawn. Beneath the paving, Ki carries the building without speaking. In the darkness below all visible things, Nama remains like hidden water, the mother whose beginning cannot be approached directly. Then the breeze moves. It passes across your face, enters the courtyard, stirs smoke, and makes a hanging reed mat tremble against the wall. Enlil's world has opened. The age of distant beginnings has not been erased, but it has been made quiet. The oldest powers endure as foundations, while younger authority travels through temples, decrees, offerings, and fearful human hearts. Perhaps this is the first disappearance recorded by the ancient imagination, not extinction, not ruin, but withdrawal into sacred distance. A presence can become too old to see clearly. It can sink into the water beneath the story, rise into the unreachable sky above it, or remain beneath every footstep as silent ground. And in that soft fading, the first kind of being leaves no bones, no empty dwelling, and no final cry. Only names remain, pressed carefully into clay. The wind no longer reaches you clearly. It has grown muffled, as though thick walls now surround the night. Walls built from compacted earth and the weight of many generations. Beneath a low ceiling of cedar beams, a lamp flame leans gently inside a scribal room. Its smoke leaves a dark stain above the niche. Clay tablets lie upon reed mats, some still soft, some already hardened into the patience of stone. A scribe lowers his stylus. He is not recording barley tonight. He is arranging names. Some are familiar to worshippers in public courtyards, names spoken during offerings and festivals. Others are strange, paired, ancient, and almost hidden behind the splendid authority of greater gods. They belong to a shadowed ancestry, a line of divine figures who seem less like rulers receiving prayers than like rulers whose age has ended. In lists preserved from Mesopotamia, the mighty Enlil could be given ancestors whose names formed solemn pairs. Among them appear figures called Enki and Ninki, not the celebrated Lord of Wisdom and Fresh Water, but older names belonging to a different sacred genealogy. Their presence is easily confusing. Ancient scribes were apparently untroubled by the possibility that future readers might prefer everyone to have completely separate names. You watch the stylus make another careful wedge. These ancestral pairs stand behind the ruling divine household like portraits in a dim corridor. They are acknowledged, ordered, and placed respectfully near the beginning. Yet they rarely step forward as active personalities in popular stories. They seem to occupy sacred memory rather than everyday divine government. Their purpose is not always to act. Their purpose is to make authority older. That idea matters in a land of rival cities. A ruler may control canals, soldiers, and storehouses. Yet power always looks more secure when it claims ancient roots. A temple may possess wealth and influence, yet its standing grows deeper when its god is not merely strong, but descended from powers reaching into the first arrangements of the universe. Genealogy becomes a sacred foundation stone. Each older name adds another layer below the visible building. The University of Oxford's collection of Sumerian literary texts preserves a haunting passage from a poem concerning the downfall of a celebrated city. In it, laments are compared to the mourning performed by Enlil's ancestors at the Holy Mound. The image is subdued and strange. The ancestors are not riding in triumph, hurling storms across the plain. They are associated with grief, solemnity, and a sacred place lying close to the deepest roots of divine order. The Holy Mound rises in your mind. It is not a cheerful green hill beneath spring flowers. It feels compact, ancient, almost enclosed, like a mound of first earth preserved inside a temple world. There, according to learned tradition, ancestral powers could be remembered near the god who now commanded destinies. They are beneath his brilliance, yet not beneath his respect. Their silence gives his voice depth. Perhaps power always needs silence behind it. Among these old figures, one name has a particularly unsettling quality: Enmeshara. He belongs to traditions in which an older divine authority has been defeated, displaced, or confined. In some learned writings, he is connected with the underworld and with powers once held, then lost. His name appears not as the friendly guardian of a household or the bright patron of a thriving city, but as the residue of an earlier arrangement. You feel the lamp flame shrink slightly. A divine ruler does not always disappear because worshippers forget him. Sometimes, in the sacred imagination, he disappears because another divine order must explain its victory. Enmeshara becomes useful as a defeated predecessor, the ancient presence whose loss allows present authority to appear lawful. He is not merely absent. He is the shadow proving that a throne changed hands. The thought is quietly chilling. There may have been ceremonies in which such ancestral beings were honored precisely because they were no longer active. Offerings for dead or withdrawn gods carry a peculiar tenderness. You do not feed them because they will bless a harvest at sunrise. You acknowledge them because the world still stands upon something taken from them. In later Mesopotamian ritual learning, old divine ancestors could be associated with the realm below and with commemorative offerings. This is not evidence for buried biological kings or vanished species beneath the soil. It is evidence for a civilization able to imagine that even divine power had ruins, graves, and family obligations. Eternity, apparently, could have its memorial customs. There is something wonderfully odd about that. A modern family may feel nervous when seating two feuding relatives at the same dinner table. Mesopotamian scholars dealt with a greater challenge keeping the current rulers of the cosmos respectable while acknowledging divine predecessors who had perhaps been defeated, confined, or reduced to receiving solemn gifts below ground. One imagines temple etiquette becoming rather delicate. At the room's far edge, several tablets sit damaged. One has lost its lower half. Another is chipped where a sequence of names might once have continued. A third preserves enough to suggest a pattern, but not enough to settle its meaning. That is where modern fantasies often begin. A missing name becomes a lost species. A divine conflict becomes an ancient war between competing races. A sacred genealogy becomes a hidden record of rulers who physically walked the earth. The temptation is understandable. The old lists resemble a census of vanished presences. Name follows name, pair follows pair, all arranged with deliberate care. To an eye hungry for hidden history, they can look like evidence of successive peoples who rose, ruled, and disappeared. Yet the clay does not explain itself in those terms. It offers a theology of ancestry, order, and displacement, written by minds for whom gods could have parents, rivals, defeats, and dwelling places beneath the world. Scholars continue to question how these ancestral sequences developed. Some may preserve extremely old local traditions. Others may have been shaped by learned priests seeking to unite rival divine families into a single ordered lineage. It remains uncertain whether all worshippers understood these obscure figures clearly, or whether they belonged mainly to the quiet chambers of temple scholarship. That uncertainty does not lessen their power. It makes them seem further away. You step from the scribal room into an enclosed sacred court. The night air is cooler here, scented with burnt oil and damp brick. At the center rises a low platform, its edges softened by age. Nothing upon it shines. Nothing announces a miracle. Yet the platform seems to contain the memory of every forgotten offering placed there with careful hands. Somewhere beneath the paving lies the imagined country of old divinity. There, the ancestral pairs no longer speak commands across the sky. Enmeshara no longer holds whatever authority tradition once placed in his hands. Their age survives through lists, laments, ritual hints, and the uneasy respect granted to powers whose removal made the visible order possible. They are not erased completely. That would be too simple. They are placed at a distance, given names but few voices, acknowledged but not restored. Like buried foundations beneath a palace, they remain essential precisely because no one walks among them anymore. The lamp behind you flickers out. Darkness settles over the mound, the tablets, and the quiet floor of the sanctuary. You sense no monster in that stillness, no hidden army waiting beneath the earth, only the faint impression of dethroned antiquity, of sacred ancestors whose rule ended so thoroughly that their absence became part of the architecture of heaven, and their names remain below the living world, arranged carefully in rows of clay, as quiet as sleeping kings. A dull ache enters the world, not as a wound, but as exhaustion. Beneath the high authority of the ruling gods, lesser divine beings bend over difficult work. They clear channels through stubborn soil. They raise embankments against wandering water. They carry baskets heavy with mud, again and again, while the land waits to become useful. The air is close and humid. You stand at the edge of an unfinished canal, where dark water gathers in a shallow trench. Wet clay sticks to bare ankles. Reeds rasp against one another in the faint evening breeze. Somewhere nearby, a basket lands upon the ground with a soft, heavy thud. The sound is repeated, then repeated again, until it becomes the rhythm of an existence shaped entirely by labor. These are not human workers. In the sacred imagination of Mesopotamia, divine servants once performed the burdens that later define ordinary life. A Sumerian composition, commonly known as Enki and Ninmah, preserved and studied through Oxford's Great Project on Ancient Sumerian Literature, describes the gods struggling with their work and complaining about its weight. In a related Akkadian tradition, the lesser gods dig waterways and maintain the land until their suffering becomes intolerable. The world is being prepared, but those preparing it are weary. You can almost feel the rough handle of a digging tool pressed against the palm. Even though the scene belongs to divine myth, its textures are painfully familiar. The aching shoulders, the mud beneath fingernails, the anger that grows when labor appears endless, while those above seem undisturbed by it. Any farmer, builder, or canal worker hearing such a story would recognize its emotional truth immediately. Creation has a workforce. That is a curious discovery within stories of divine order. The cosmos does not unfold like a perfect flower opening in the sunlight. It requires digging, lifting, hauling, repairing, and waiting. The ordered earth is not only declared into being, it is worked into being by figures who eventually decide that enough has become enough. Night settles slowly over the canal bank. Torches burn in clay holders, their smoke carrying the scent of pitch and dry reeds. The divine laborers gather in the darkness. No music accompanies them. No ceremonial procession gives dignity to their tired bodies. Their tools lie abandoned in the mud. Simple objects suddenly made dangerous by refusal. In the Akkadian poem, often called Atrahasis, the lesser gods endure generations of exhausting labor before surrounding the dwelling of Enlil in protest. Their complaint becomes a crisis for divine rule. The poem was preserved on tablets studied by generations of scholars, including researchers associated with major university collections in the United States and Britain. Its central idea is startlingly plain. Even the gods can rebel when burden is treated as destiny. You hear the murmuring crowd grow still. The great household of heaven has encountered something it cannot ignore. Authority may command wind, flood, harvest, and kingship. Yet authority becomes fragile when every exhausted servant lays down a tool at once. There is no need for shouting in the darkness. The silence of abandoned work is accusation enough. One can imagine Enlil inside his dwelling, awakened by an unpleasant disturbance outside. Being supreme is evidently less restful than temples make it look. Even divine management discovers the ancient truth that neglected workers eventually arrange a meeting at the most inconvenient hour. Still, the scene is more than amusing, for the lesser gods occupy an uncomfortable place in the sacred structure. They are divine, yet subordinated. They possess power, yet they spend it on duties chosen by others. They belong to the older world, yet their revolt prepares the arrival of a different kind of being, one made specifically to assume what they can no longer bear. Their disappearance begins through replacement. They are not swallowed by a beast or shattered by lightning. They do not simply vanish beyond the mountains. Their importance dissolves when their work is transferred elsewhere. Once a new laboring presence enters the sacred design, these weary divine workers no longer stand at the center of daily necessity. Their protest succeeds, but success carries a quiet ending. The world continues, and it no longer requires their hands in the same manner. This is not yet the hour of human voices. There is only the decision forming among divine powers, a decision whose consequences are still wrapped in darkness. Somewhere, a motherly creator listens. Somewhere, a wise God understands that the problem cannot be solved by another order shouted into the night. A replacement must be shaped, something capable of carrying baskets, opening channels, tending fields, supplying offerings, and accepting the burden rejected by divine backs. The thought arrives softly, almost politely. It is possible to be created because someone else is tired. Few origin stories are more quietly unsettling. They do not begin with humanity treasured as the final ornament of existence. They suggest an arrival linked to work, duty, and an older refusal. Before there is a human household, there is divine fatigue. Before there is bread offered upon an altar, there is mud lifted from a trench by unwilling hands. A fringe interpretation has grown around these laboring gods. Some modern storytellers describe them as physical beings, miners, or workers from another world, performing industrial tasks upon an ancient Earth until human replacements were engineered. It is an image shaped by rockets, laboratories, and modern anxieties rather than by the tablets themselves. The texts speak through poetry, theology, and social memory, not through technical reports hidden in clay. Yet the misunderstanding has a reason. The original story already feels remarkably strange. Divine beings labor, they mutiny. A new servant population becomes necessary. The ancient imagination has placed hierarchy, protest, and replacement at the very heart of human beginnings. No spacecraft is required to make that arrangement disturbing. The clay is unsettling enough. Researchers continue to debate what social realities lie beneath these stories. Some read them as reflections of irrigation societies where communal labor supported temples and ruling households. Others emphasize the religious explanation of why people owed offerings and service to the gods. Perhaps the story allowed listeners to understand grueling work as part of cosmic order. Perhaps it also preserved a quieter awareness that burdens imposed from above can never remain invisible forever. You walk among the discarded tools. Moonlight lies pale upon wet baskets. The canal has stopped growing. Without workers, the water settles uselessly in its trench, reflecting stars that offer no practical assistance. Beyond the worksite, the flat plain stretches into darkness, still waiting for cultivation. Storage rooms, bread ovens, sleeping mats, and the low evening voices that one day will fill it. The divine laborers stand together, neither victorious nor defeated. Their revolt has made them visible, perhaps for the final time. They have revealed a flaw inside the ordered heavens. Someone must always carry what civilization demands. Someone must lift mud, guide water, sow grain, grind flour, rebuild walls, and place food before powers who claim the world as their estate. The torches sink lower, one by one. Their flames shorten against the damp night air. The lesser gods no longer reach for their baskets. They no longer turn toward the unfinished banks. In their stillness, an absence opens, wide enough for another kind of life to enter, wide enough for an entire human future of tired hands and patient fields. The canal water trembles in the darkness, and in its faint reflection, you glimpse the outline of a world about to inherit a burden it never requested. Dawn spreads slowly across the marshes, turning each shallow pool into a pale sheet of silver. The mud is cool beneath your feet, and the reeds carry small beads of water that catch the earliest light. Somewhere beyond the channels, fish disturb the surface with gentle circles, then vanish again into the dark green depths. A shape stands near the bank. It is not crowned like a ruler, nor armed like a guardian at a temple door. It seems quieter than either. Its power belongs to knowledge, to the hidden understanding of measured fields, careful words, star patterns, healing plants, and the proper placing of foundations. In the imagination of ancient Mesopotamia, civilization did not simply teach itself. Wisdom had bearers. They were remembered as sages. Their clearest arrangement appears in later Mesopotamian learned tradition, where 7 wise beings are placed in the remote age before the Great Flood. They are linked with ancient kings and with the city of Eridu, one of the oldest sacred centers in southern Mesopotamia. Archaeologists from the University of Chicago and other major institutions have studied Eridu as a settlement whose temple sequence reaches deep into the early growth of urban religious life. The physical city is quiet now. In your mind, it rises from low earth beside watery spaces, its walls touched by heat and wind. Reed boats move among channels, carrying fish, clay, baskets, and bundles of cut plants. At the sacred center, a temple stands upon older structures, each rebuilding covering another memory. Smoke rises from offerings. Sand works slowly into every seam. Beneath the sunlight, the settlement seems almost too modest to claim a connection with the first wisdom of the world. Yet Eridu holds that atmosphere. It is a place where water and knowledge seem to meet. The wise god associated with hidden freshwater depth becomes, in later understanding, the patron of skill, intelligence, craft, and clever arrangement. From this watery sacred world, the sages are imagined as bringing the arts that allow settled life to endure. They do not teach grand secrets first. They teach what matters: how to form bricks and set them straight, how to mark the boundaries of cultivated ground, how to organize rites so that the city keeps favor with its gods, how to recognize sickness, prepare remedies, read warnings, preserve names, and make order repeat itself from season to season. Civilization, viewed from a soft bed at night, can sound like polished monuments and shining treasures. Viewed from a marsh settlement, it is mostly the achievement of not allowing everything to collapse by next week. The sages belong to that careful miracle. One later account describes primeval wisdom figures connected with fish-like forms, creatures clothed in the appearance of water life as they emerge to instruct humanity. The image became especially vivid in Assyrian palace art many centuries later, where protective beings wearing fish-shaped garments appear carved upon stone walls. Their bodies are human in posture, yet draped with an outer form recalling something drawn from river or sea. You watch the imagined figure move ashore. Water slips from its strange covering. Its footsteps leave shallow impressions in the mud. It carries no treasure chest, no weapon glowing with impossible light, only the solemn impression that knowledge has crossed a boundary. Behind it lies the silent world of hidden waters. Before it lies the rough, unfinished ground where homes, rituals, workshops, and written memory may take root. Naturally, modern fantasies love this image. A fish-clothed teacher arriving from water sounds almost designed for speculation. Some claim these figures represent survivors from a drowned civilization. Others describe visitors from another planet, misunderstood by frightened villagers who recorded them as divine beings. The idea travels easily through glossy illustrations, whispered documentaries, and confident voices accompanied by music that clearly expects trouble. The old material is subtler. Fish garments in art do not demonstrate aquatic people walking through ancient streets. Primeval sages in learned records do not provide a catalogue of biological species. Their watery appearance links them with sacred wisdom, cleansing, protection, and the deep source of order. They live where symbol and memory overlap, which is precisely the place modern certainty finds most frustrating. Still, something has disappeared. The sages do not remain among ordinary communities as visible teachers. They belong to the distant age of first instruction, the age in which the essential arts must be delivered and established. Their task is not to sit forever beside every oven correcting the bread, or to follow each surveyor along a canal bank, reminding him where to place his cord. Once knowledge enters the world, the teachers withdraw behind it. Their disappearance is the disappearance of first instruction. You can feel its melancholy. Every skill now practiced by human hands carries the faint idea of an earlier giver whose name is fading. A potter turns clay on a wheel, yet the first lesson lies beyond recall. A healer selects leaves and oils, yet the original whisper has become tradition. A scribe presses signs into damp clay, yet the beginning of writing feels as distant as moonlight upon water. In one strand of scholarly tradition, the seven sages belong specifically to the era before the flood, while figures following the catastrophe are treated differently, as human experts of a lesser age. That division creates a quiet fall from closeness to sacred knowledge. Before destruction, wisdom walks in uncanny form beside the first rulers. In the surviving world, wisdom remains, but it is thinner, copied, debated, inherited by people who can no longer meet its earliest bearers. Researchers still discuss how far these later traditions preserve genuinely ancient Sumerian ideas, and how far scholars of later centuries constructed an idealized past. The oldest southern cities certainly treasured sacred knowledge, ritual skill, and divine patronage. Yet the neat procession of 7 pre-flood sages is most clearly visible in texts produced long after the earliest city temples first rose from the plain. That distinction is important. It does not empty the story of wonder. It gives the wonder its proper shadows. The sages are not simple eyewitness evidence hidden in a museum drawer. They are a learned memory of beginnings, shaped by generations who looked backward and felt that true wisdom must once have been nearer, purer, less damaged by time. Perhaps every age feels that way. You sit beside the water while sunlight strengthens across the reeds. A dragonfly hovers over a pool, bright and motionless for a moment, then darts away. The figure at the bank is already becoming difficult to hold in your sight. Was there truly someone there, draped in the sign of hidden waters? Or has the landscape itself suggested a teacher? Because flowing water teaches patience better than any lecturer. A faint scent of wet clay rises in the warmth. Within workshops, hands begin to shape jars. Within courtyards, grain is ground between stones. Within sacred rooms, careful words are spoken in an order learned from someone, and learned by that someone from another, until the chain disappears into the mist of origin. The sages no longer need to stand visibly at the edge of the marsh. Their withdrawal is complete whenever a city believes its knowledge came from a time holier than its own. They survive in the measuring cord, the protective charm, the ritual vessel, and the tablet holding signs that outlast the hand which formed them. Across the quiet channel, widening ripples erase a reflection. The wise beings have returned to the uncertain place from which instruction rises, leaving the human world with skills, symbols, and the uneasy suspicion that the greatest lessons were delivered by teachers who could never remain. A doorway appears in the heat, its mud brick sides washed pale beneath a fierce and cloudless sky. Beyond it lies a sacred enclosure, quiet except for the scrape of sandals and the soft buzzing of insects near a water jar. The threshold seems ordinary at first, merely packed earth beneath a wooden lintel. Then your gaze settles upon the image fixed above the entrance. Wings stretch outward. The body belongs partly to a great bird, its feathers arranged with deliberate strength. The head bears the severe power of a lion, mouth open, eyes alert, as though the creature can smell danger approaching across the courtyard. It is neither an animal of the marshes nor a beast of the open plain. It belongs to the guarded space between worlds. This is where the fifth kind takes form. Among the ancient images of southern Mesopotamia, hybrid beings appear upon precious objects, temple decorations, seals, and ritual furnishings. Excavations at the city of Ur, directed by Leonard Woolley and supported by the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania Museum, revealed remarkable objects decorated with a lion-headed eagle. Modern scholars often call this creature Imdugud or Anzu, a powerful emblem associated with divine authority and protection. Its body is an argument in feathers and claws. A lion commands the ground, an eagle commands the air. Joined together, they offer a creature able to watch from above and strike below, guarding the fragile border where sacred order meets the uncertain outside world. It does not need to walk through a street in flesh and bone to make visitors lower their voices. Its carved stare performs the work. You pass beneath it carefully. Inside the enclosure, the shade is welcome. The sudden coolness touches your arms like water. A faint scent of cedar resin rises from a wooden door panel, mingling with incense, wool, and the dry mineral smell of clay walls. Light falls through an opening above, forming a bright square on the floor. Dust moves slowly through it, each grain seeming briefly suspended between earth and heaven. Places of value need guardians. A storeroom holding grain needs a seal. A palace holding authority needs soldiers. A temple holding divine presence requires something stranger, because the danger it confronts cannot always be seen. Illness, disorder, hostile intention, broken oaths, jealous powers, unlucky forces drifting at the edge of understanding. All might attempt to cross a protected boundary. The hybrid guardian stands against such crossings. In Sumerian art, the lion-headed eagle sometimes spreads its wings over animals, grasping them with commanding force. The scene is beautiful, but not gentle. It expresses mastery, the controlled violence of a world in which order must remain stronger than chaos. Beneath its wings, creatures are not wandering freely. They are held, contained, and made part of an arrangement greater than themselves. Ancient security is rarely subtle. A modern home may display a polite little sign requesting visitors to wipe their feet. A Sumerian sacred building prefers a flying lion capable of seizing two animals at once. It is difficult to complain that the message lacks clarity. You are entering a place under protection, and whatever intentions you carry are expected to behave themselves. Yet the lion-headed eagle is only one shape within a larger family of impossible watchers. Cylinder seals reveal heroes grappling with beasts, human figures joined with animal qualities, serpentine bodies, winged powers, and strange attendants whose meaning depends upon a world of stories now only partly audible. Some beings guard divine trees, some frame a ceremony, some appear in contests where strength holds disorder in balance. Their bodies are assembled from familiar parts. That may be what makes them unsettling. A creature utterly unknown can be dismissed as fantasy. A creature built from eyes, paws, wings, horns, scales, and human posture feels closer, as though the pieces of creation have been rearranged by an intelligence with a purpose. You recognize every fragment, yet the completed being does not belong to any pasture, marsh, or stable. It belongs to the threshold. As centuries pass, this language of protection grows ever grander across Mesopotamia. Much later, Assyrian kings place enormous human-headed winged bulls and lions at palace gateways, their carved bodies designed to appear complete when seen from different angles. They are not Sumerian creatures preserved unchanged through time. They belong to later royal worlds. Still, their presence reveals the enduring power of the same idea. Authority should be guarded by beings greater than nature allows. A quirky mystery attaches itself to those later stone guardians. Many are carved with 5 legs, so that from the front they stand firmly, while from the side they stride forward in stately motion. Nothing has gone wrong with the animal. The sculptor is creating 2 perfect views for a moving visitor. Even monsters, it seems, must make a good first impression. The earlier guardians are smaller, quieter, and perhaps more intimate. You imagine a worshipper approaching a sanctuary at Ur, carrying a little bowl of flour or oil. The person sees the protective creature shining upon an object used in ceremony. No explanation is required. The image says that this place is supervised by forces unavailable in ordinary life. Within these walls, the city does not rely only upon brickwork, locks, or tired human watchmen. It relies upon a sacred animal that never existed in the reeds. Some fringe storytellers treat hybrid beings as portraits of living species, preserved by artists who saw winged creatures, animal-headed rulers, or engineered guardians in ancient cities. The idea is alluring because the images possess such confidence. Their makers do not draw them apologetically. They give them symmetry, strength, and a rightful place beside gods and rulers. But confident imagery is not the same as a biological record. A guardian may be vivid precisely because it expresses a fear or hope larger than observation. Still, the question remains open in a gentler form. Scholars continue to discuss the changing meanings of particular hybrid creatures across cities, centuries, and religious settings. Did a lion-headed eagle always signify the same protective power? Did temple worshippers recognize stories now lost to us? Did later artists preserve old symbols faithfully, or adapt them for new rulers and new anxieties? The images survive beautifully, while much of their spoken explanation has vanished. You enter a smaller chamber, Here the walls are bare, except for a seal impression pressed into clay near a storage jar. The tiny design contains a creature with wings spread wide. Its body is scarcely longer than your fingernail, yet it marks the jar as protected, counted, and connected with authority. The guardian has become portable. It can travel upon clay, seal a door, close a container, or accompany a message through uncertain streets. That is how this kind disappears. Not in a battle, not through a flood, not by retreating into the stars or waters. The hybrid guardian disappears from imagined presence into symbol. It becomes carved stone, metal ornament, seal impression, museum object, and the faint discomfort you feel when its fixed eyes still seem to notice you. Once, it guarded thresholds where worshippers carried offerings beneath the sun. Now it stands in still galleries, separated from sacred smoke and murmured prayers. Children glance at it. Scholars measure it. Visitors admire the craft, then walk toward the next case, carrying no offering and fearing no invisible trespass. Yet something remains alert. The creature's wings are still open. Its lion mouth is still poised. Its claws still hold the vulnerable world beneath them with impossible ease. Though no living guardian emerges from the temple shadow, the idea has survived the body it never possessed. You pause at the doorway, where sunlight lies white upon the ground. Behind you, the chamber keeps its silence. Ahead, heat trembles above the courtyard stones. For one soft moment, you understand why ancient people placed unnatural beings at the edge of precious spaces. A threshold is never merely a line beneath the foot. It is the place where safety ends, where uncertainty begins, and where the human heart quietly wishes for a watcher stronger than itself. Above the entrance, the winged lion waits without breathing. It has vanished from life, if life was ever claimed for it at all. Yet it remains on guard, holding back the darkness through the patient authority of an image. The room has narrowed to the circle of a single lamp. Its flame moves gently whenever someone passes beyond the doorway, and the shadows of shelves lean across the floor like silent reeds. Before you lies a tray lined with cloth. Upon it rests not one complete tablet, but several pieces of clay, each marked with wedges, each ending abruptly where the earth has taken the rest. One fragment contains half a line, another holds the beginning of a name, followed by a jagged edge. A third preserves several beautiful signs, sharp enough to reveal the confidence of the hand that formed them, yet not enough to reveal what the hand intended to finish. The broken surfaces are pale and rough. They look almost fresh, although centuries of darkness have settled into them. This is how an ancient voice reaches you, not as a smooth recital spoken beside a fire, but as interruption. A sentence begins, then falls away. A divine name survives, while the action connected with it is missing. A list offers 3 entries, perhaps 4, perhaps many more, and then the clay gives nothing but silence. The human mind dislikes such silence. It leans forward, eager to complete what cannot safely be completed. The ancient city of Nippur yielded an enormous body of Sumerian literary tablets during excavations connected with the University of Pennsylvania. Many arrived from the ground damaged, with surfaces worn away or whole portions broken off. Scholars discovered hymns, laments, myths, school exercises, prayers, and wisdom compositions, but often in pieces that required comparison with fragments stored in distant collections. You lift one imagined shard carefully. It is lighter than expected. The clay carries a faint, chalky dryness against your fingertips. On one side, lines run neatly in a practiced hand. On the other, a corner is missing, taking with it perhaps a description, perhaps a warning, perhaps nothing more mysterious than a repeated phrase copied by a sleepy student. There is the delicate difficulty. Not every tablet was a sacred original placed directly into the earth by the first teller of a story. Many literary tablets were copied in scribal schools, where students practiced the language, forms, and respected compositions inherited from older generations. A boy seated upon a mat might copy a hymn while glancing nervously at a teacher. He might misread a sign, skip a phrase, press too deeply, or abandon the exercise when the lesson ended. The missing truth may be magnificent. It may also be homework. That small possibility introduces a quiet form of humility. The tablet in your hand may preserve a revered myth, but the object itself may have once belonged to an ordinary afternoon of study. Outside, sunlight might have glared against a courtyard wall. A teacher might have corrected a clumsy sign. Someone might have complained about hunger, heat, or aching knees. Ancient mystery is not diminished by ordinary life. It becomes more intimate. Across modern museum rooms, scholars have spent lifetimes joining these scattered pieces. A fragment from one excavation may preserve lines missing from another tablet, copied centuries apart. Two edges may fit together physically, like a broken bowl reunited after a long separation. In other cases, the fit happens through words, repeated lines, shared phrases, or the unmistakable structure of a known composition. A missing passage can return unexpectedly. At Nippur, newly uncovered fragments helped restore portions of a hymn honoring the goddess Nansho, a composition concerned with justice and the treatment of the vulnerable. Text once obscured by damage became clearer because another piece emerged from the same ancient soil. Such discoveries are not grand revelations shouted across a crowded hall. They are quieter. A scholar bends over signs, recognizes a sequence, and suddenly several silent lines begin to breathe again. Yet restoration has limits. Suppose a tablet names divine beings within a broken sequence. One sign might allow two plausible readings. A damaged word might refer to a creature, an office, a divine quality, or a place. A missing line might explain everything, or overturn the entire interpretation. Without that line, certainty should become softer, slower, and more patient. Modern retellings are rarely patient. A crack across clay becomes a secret deliberately hidden. A damaged list becomes evidence that authorities removed inconvenient beings from history. Empty space is filled with vanished species, forbidden technologies, underwater empires, or celestial visitors. The less the tablet says, the more confidently the missing portion is sometimes described. Silence becomes a convenient witness, because silence cannot object. You feel a mild smile form in the lamplight. It is an efficient method of discovery, rather like finding a torn shopping list and announcing that the missing half described the location of a royal treasure. Perhaps it did. More likely, someone needed onions. Ancient texts deserve wonder, certainly, but they also deserve the dignity of not being forced to say whatever the present age finds entertaining. A soft scraping sound reaches you. At another table, a curator turns a fragment beneath angled light. Shadows enter the incisions, making the signs easier to distinguish. The smallest marks matter. A wedge tilted slightly differently may change a name. A line running beyond the visible edge may show that the text continued. Even fingerprints sometimes survive in the clay. Impressions left by a maker whose story remains utterly unknown. There is a quirky tenderness in those marks. A tablet may carry a tale about cosmic powers, yet its reverse can preserve the pressure of a human thumb. The grandest imaginable world is carried upon something shaped by skin, water, earth, and an impatient stylus. A universe of vanished beings may depend upon one ancient worker remembering not to smudge the damp surface before it dries. Scholars still debate how variations between surviving copies should be understood. Some differences may be simple errors made during teaching. Others may represent local traditions, deliberate revisions, or changing religious ideas. When one version places a figure prominently and another treats that figure briefly, the variation may carry meaning. It may also reflect nothing more profound than an incomplete tablet and a distracted copyist. You cannot always tell. That is the true boundary within the archive. The fragments allow a careful reconstruction of many ancient stories, yet they refuse the comfort of perfect access. They show that divine beings, floods, sages, and guarded thresholds occupied the minds of Mesopotamian writers. They do not offer an undamaged catalog proving that 5 literal species lived upon the earth and were erased from memory. The tray remains before you. Beyond the lamp, rows of tablets fade into shadow. Thousands of small brown witnesses stored in drawers, cabinets, and carefully labeled boxes. Each object contains a little preservation and a little loss. Even complete tablets belong to worlds whose gestures, tones, jokes, fears, and assumptions can never be fully returned. You place the fragment down. Its broken edge meets no matching piece tonight. The missing line stays missing, yet the silence no longer feels empty. It feels disciplined, almost sacred, reminding you that the ancient world is not most truthful when it answers every question. Sometimes it is most truthful when it permits the crack to remain visible and allows the darkness beyond the clay to remain undisturbed. The first human breath enters a world already waiting for hands. It rises beneath a dim roof, where lamps burn steadily and bowls of water stand beside lumps of clean clay. The air smells of wet earth, crushed grain, and wool warmed by bodies gathered close together. Outside, channels glimmer under moonlight, their banks unfinished, their fields still asking for labor. You do not arrive as a conqueror, you arrive as an answer. Within the sacred stories of Mesopotamia, human life begins under a troubling arrangement. The gods possess land, cities, temples, watercourses, livestock, and the splendid order of existence, yet such order demands constant effort. Food must be produced, offerings must be prepared, canals must be kept open, sacred houses must be maintained with bread, drink, music, incense, and care. A new worker is required. In the Sumerian story of Enki and Ninmah, the mother goddess receives the task of shaping human beings from clay. Enki, wise in planning and hidden knowledge, declares that the creature already existing within her imagination should be given form, so that divine labor may be relieved. The account is preserved through tablets recovered from ancient Mesopotamian centers and studied by scholars connected with Oxford and major American collections. The idea is simple, but it does not feel gentle. You kneel beside the clay. It is soft between your fingers, cooler than the surrounding air, carrying the dark scent of riverbanks after water has withdrawn. Ancient people know clay intimately. Their houses rise from it. Their vessels hold grain and beer because of it. Their writing survives because damp earth accepts the pressure of signs, then hardens around memory. To make humanity from clay is not merely poetic. It places human life within the material of ordinary survival. You are shaped from the same substance as walls and tablets. That notion carries humility. A human body may walk beneath stars, speak prayers, raise children, judge disputes, and dream of eternity. Yet its sacred beginning lies in workable soil. Clay bends while wet. Clay cracks when neglected. Clay returns to dust when time and weather have finished their long argument with every human effort. The Creator's hands continue their careful work. A head takes form. Arms appear, suited to carrying, digging, lifting, kneading, weaving, and gathering. Feet are shaped to cross courtyards, canal edges, temple steps, and fields warmed beneath a merciless sun. The first human figure is not described as a being designed for leisure beneath shaded palms. The body is practical. It belongs to a world where even sacred purpose arrives wearing work clothes. There is almost a dry smile inside the tale. Humanity receives consciousness, dexterity, community, prayer, music, and the ability to complain beautifully about all of it. Yet at the bottom of the arrangement stands an earthly assignment. Please attend to the difficult chores formerly producing distress among divine employees. The heavens solve a labor crisis, and humanity inherits agriculture. The lamps tremble gently. In a related Babylonian account, preserved among tablets studied in institutions including Yale's Babylonian collection, human beings are made through clay mixed with the substance of a sacrificed divine figure. Here, people carry not only earthiness, but an unsettling portion of divinity within their origin. Their lives are lowly enough for service, yet meaningful enough to contain something older and higher than mud alone. This tension never quite disappears. You're made for burden, but you're not merely a tool. You can offer bread because you understand obligation. You can pour drink before a sacred image because you understand longing and dependence. You can sing a lament because labor, sickness, flooding, loss, and time enter your inner world as more than inconvenience. A basket has no sorrow. A shovel does not wonder why the field must be repaired again. A person does. Beyond the chamber, the city begins to wake within imagination. A woman presses dough into round loaves while smoke curls through an opening above her oven. A brewer checks jars lined carefully in shade. A gardener clears silt from a narrow channel with slow, practiced movements. A child carries a small basket of reeds, proud for several steps, then less enthusiastic as its weight becomes apparent. Every small action sustains the larger agreement. The temples of southern Mesopotamia received food offerings, textiles, oils, animals, and drink through organized systems supported by human work. Administrative tablets from early cities record rations, labor groups, fields, herds, and deliveries with an attention so precise that sacred obligation becomes visible in measures of barley and jars of beer. People did not merely believe they served divine powers. Their economy was shaped around that service. A prayer can smell like fresh bread, yet there is an uncomfortable edge beneath such order. When a society explains work as humanity's original purpose, labor gains sacred dignity, but authority gains a powerful argument as well. A person bending in the field may be told the burden belongs not merely to a ruler's demand, but to the design of creation itself. One cannot easily resign from a task written into the first breath of humankind. Historians differ over how strongly these stories justify temple economies and social hierarchy. Some interpret the tales as sacred reflections of lives organized around communal irrigation and food production. Others see a more pointed explanation for why people supply the gods through institutions managed by priestly and royal authorities. The tablets preserve belief, but belief can also serve those who distribute the baskets. A stranger modern idea attaches itself here. Some fringe interpreters claim that clay creation describes deliberate genetic design, as though ancient writers hid laboratory procedures within poetic accounts of shaping Earth. They read divine mixture as biological engineering, and sacred labor as evidence of an engineered workforce. The claim is not supported by the literary character of the tablets, yet its popularity reveals how strongly the old story still unsettles people. No one enjoys wondering whether their purpose was assigned by someone else's need. You look down at your hands. Clay remains beneath the fingernails. It dries in fine lines across the skin, tightening gently when you curl your fingers. These hands can plant seed, cradle an infant, seal a tablet, repair a bank, prepare a meal, or lift a cup during a quiet ritual. The same limbs built for burdens also become instruments of tenderness, invention, memory, and refusal. Perhaps purpose expands beyond its beginning. A being shaped to carry loads may learn to count stars. A mouth intended to recite offerings may whisper comfort beside a sleeping child. A body formed for service may create songs so mournful and beautiful that distant listeners, living thousands of years later, can still feel the sadness held within the clay. Night deepens outside the chamber. In the fields, no one moves now. Tools rest beside low walls. Grain sleeps within storage jars. A final lamp burns near the sacred room, warming the bowl from which a meal has been offered to unseen powers. The city is quiet, yet the agreement remains, as steady as breath. You were shaped from earth, within these old stories, because work required a bearer. But the figure standing in the lamplight seems already greater than that first assignment. Mud has taken breath. Burden has learned thought. Service has become memory, music, worry, affection, and the stubborn wish to understand why any of it began. The clay dries slowly upon your palms. Rain begins with a sound too soft to fear. A few drops darken the baked earth near a doorway, leaving round marks upon dust. A woman lifts a jar from the courtyard. A child looks toward the sky, delighted by the sudden coolness. Somewhere, a farmer welcomes the first scent of damp soil and expects relief for thirsty fields. Then the horizon closes. Clouds gather until the pale sky becomes a single low ceiling. Wind enters the reed beds and forces them flat against the water. The familiar channels no longer glitter calmly between their banks. They swell, darken, and move with a muscular impatience, carrying uprooted plants, broken baskets, and branches torn from groves beyond sight. No one smiles at the rain now. In the Sumerian flood account, preserved on a clay tablet from Nippur, now held by the University of Pennsylvania Museum, a ruler named Ziusudra receives warning that destruction will come upon humankind. The tablet is damaged, and much of the warning has vanished, yet enough remains to reveal the terrible center of the story. Storm winds rise together, a flood sweeps across the land, and a great boat is driven upon the waters for 7 days and 7 nights. You stand near a city wall as the first panic moves through it. Doors open sharply. Voices cross one another in the rain. Men hurry toward an embankment carrying baskets of earth, as though patient maintenance can still command the swollen river. Donkeys pull against their ropes. Dogs bark at water entering alleys where water has no business being. Oil lamps vanish behind shutters, then vanish again as the wind forces darkness into every house. The flood is not merely weather, it is a decision. That is the cold heart of the ancient tale. The storm does not arrive as an accidental overflow, unfortunate but meaningless. Divine powers have judged the inhabited world, and water becomes the instrument of removal. The fields, shrines, ovens, workshops, and careful arrangements of daily life stand exposed beneath an intention greater than any wall. Only one listener receives the hidden warning. Ziusudra is described as a king, a devout ruler whose ear remains open to divine speech. The wise god associated with concealed waters does not simply announce the plan in a public square. The warning reaches him indirectly, with the peculiar secrecy that ancient stories reserve for truths too dangerous to be spoken plainly. Build a vessel. Preserve life. Do not assume the city can remain where it is. A strange irony settles over the water. The hidden depth that supports fertility now carries devastation. The element that feeds canals and cleanses ritual hands becomes the force that removes cities from memory. Water offers life with one hand and erases its arrangements with the other. Anyone who has watched a river climb beyond its ordinary edge understands this double nature without needing a priest to explain it. You hear hammering within the rain, whether the vessel is made of reeds, timber, pitch, or sacred instruction blurred by missing lines. The surviving tale leaves much unsaid. You picture workers moving urgently in mud, pulling ropes through wet hands, sealing cracks while thunder rolls beyond the rooftops. Perhaps neighbors stare. Perhaps they mock the anxious preparations. Perhaps they are too occupied with their own flooding rooms to notice one ruler obeying a warning no one else has received. Ancient disaster rarely gives convenient explanations. Across southern Mesopotamia, archaeologists have identified flood deposits at several sites, including Shuruppak, Kish, and Ur. These layers do not prove one flood covering the entire earth, nor do they prove the events of any single sacred tale. They reveal something quieter and firmer. Severe local floods were part of the remembered vulnerability of river cities. And destruction by water was never a distant abstraction. The storm grows louder. Mud brick softens beneath unrelenting rain. Roof edges collapse in heavy clumps. Storage jars roll against walls, break, and release grain into filthy water. A woven mat floats through a doorway like some ridiculous household raft, carrying nothing useful except the memory of an evening meal. In another circumstance, it might be funny. Tonight, even small absurdities feel sorrowful. The vessel rises. Below it, the city loses its shape. Streets become currents. Courtyards become pools. Thresholds disappear under brown water. The difference between private home and public road dissolves completely, because the flood respects neither ownership nor habit. What people once separated with walls, seals, and careful social rules is mixed together beneath the same restless surface. For 7 days and 7 nights, the ancient account says, waves and windstorms rock the huge boat. Inside, time is no longer measured by market openings, meals, ceremonies, or the changing work of daylight. It is measured by the beating rain, the creak of strained material, the smell of damp bodies, animals, pitch, fear, and stale air. You sit with your back against a curved wall, unable to know whether any earth remains outside the darkness. A quirky idea later clings to flood stories across the region. Some modern treasure hunters have searched mountains and remote ridges for a physical surviving vessel, hoping that timber might settle what poetry leaves open. It is an appealing dream, wonderfully stubborn and faintly unfair to ancient storytelling. A tale may carry memory without leaving a boat politely parked for future inspection. Then, one morning, light enters. The sun god appears over the waters, and Ziusudra makes an opening in the vessel. A shaft of brightness falls inside, narrow at first, then warm upon soaked wood and exhausted faces. The storm has not simply ended. The world has been revealed again, as if sunlight itself must confirm that existence continues. The king bows low. He offers sacrifice, acknowledging survival as something received rather than earned. No cheering crowd surrounds him. No city gate opens to welcome him home. The landscape has become unfamiliar, washed of ordinary assurances. Whatever remains must begin beneath the knowledge that nearly everything familiar could be removed. In the Sumerian king list, the flood becomes more than a catastrophe. It divides sacred time. Kingship exists in an immense and mysterious age. Then the flood sweeps over the land, and kingship descends again in a changed world. The phrasing turns disaster into a hinge upon which history moves. One order closes beneath water. Another rises upon wet ground. Researchers continue to debate whether Mesopotamian flood traditions grew from memories of particular inundations, from repeated regional disasters, or from religious reflection upon human fragility. No excavated layer can demonstrate the divine judgment described by a poem. No surviving line tells you precisely how memory became myth. The evidence rests between river mud and sacred imagination. The flood also attracts more extravagant readings. Some claim it erased an advanced civilization, removing physical proof of beings who instructed or governed early humanity. Such claims reach far beyond what the tablets reveal. Yet the fascination is understandable, because flood stories create an irresistible emptiness. They imagine a world removed so completely that every surviving mystery can be placed beneath its waters. You stand where the rain has ceased. Broken reeds lie tangled against a bank. The air smells of silt, wet timber, and the clean, sharp chill left by retreating storms. Nothing moves except a thin current sliding past debris. Somewhere, a bird gives one hesitant call, as though testing whether the world is prepared to hear sound again. Ziusudra survives, but survival is not restoration. The washed land does not return the voices carried away from it. The old arrangement remains hidden beneath water, memory, and grief. A vessel has crossed the dividing darkness, bearing one quiet witness into a world made emptier by rescue. And above the mud, beneath a newly opened sky, history begins again with the uncomfortable knowledge that it has already been lost once. A narrow column of clay turns slowly beneath lamplight, revealing one ruled surface, then another, then another. Unlike a flat tablet, this object seems designed to be held and rotated, as though history itself must be turned carefully in the hands. Its wedge-shaped signs are small and orderly. They do not resemble a frightened memory of catastrophe. They resemble accounting, yet what they count is astonishing. The clay prism, now kept by the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, preserves the fullest surviving version of the Sumerian king list. It names cities, rulers, and the lengths of their reigns. Its arrangement appears calm, formal, almost bureaucratic. Kingship descends from heaven, settles in one city, passes to another, and continues moving through the land like an invisible throne carried along dusty roads. At first, kingship rests in Eridu. The name Alulim appears there, and beside him stands a reign of 28,800 years. Another king follows, Alalungar, ruling for 36,000 years. The list moves to Bad Tibira, where one ruler is assigned 43,200 years. City after city receives the sacred burden. King after king governs for spans no human body could possibly endure. 8 rulers fill this first enormous age. Together, the prism assigns them 241,200 years of rule. Then the words become suddenly brief. The flood sweeps over. No long farewell is offered. No royal tomb is described. The entire immensity of those reigns meets a single line of removal, as quiet and final as a door closing in darkness. You feel the weight of the prism in your palms. Its sides are cool, its center pierced by a hole through which a rod may once have passed. It is not a jeweled relic made to dazzle the eye. It is plain clay covered with measured signs. Somehow that plainness increases its power. Wild claims usually arrive glittering and breathless. This ancient object offers impossible time in the patient tone of a clerk noting deliveries. It does not seem surprised by eternity. The rulers are connected with places already charged with sacred memory. Eridu stands near the deep source of wisdom. Bad Tibera carries an atmosphere of craft and transformation. Shurapak belongs near the final edge of the flood story. These are not random points scattered upon a map. They form a landscape in which political authority begins as something granted from above, entrusted briefly to earthly cities, then removed when an age is finished. A king does not simply take power here. Kingship arrives. That distinction would matter deeply to ancient audiences. A ruler who claims only strength may be defeated by someone stronger. A ruler whose authority descends from heaven presents a more difficult challenge. He stands within cosmic permission. His city becomes the present resting place of an institution older than any living household, older even than the remembered order of ordinary time. This may be why the earliest reigns are so immense. They are not ordinary calendar entries mistakenly enlarged by a careless scribe. They create distance. They tell you that the world of first kings cannot be reached by walking backward through a few generations. It lies across an abyss of time, in a sacred age where measurement behaves differently, where rule stretches beyond mortal limits, and where cities stand closer to the beginning of order. The strange numbers are built from a number system ancient Mesopotamian scribes understood beautifully. Their mathematics worked powerfully with units based upon 60, and the greatest pre-flood reigns unfold in grand multiples suited to cosmic scale. To modern ears, 28,800 years sounds absurdly exact. To a learned scribe, its pattern may have carried elegance, completeness, and ritual authority. Even infinity likes tidy figures. You imagine a student copying the list onto damp clay. He presses signs for thousands of years without raising an eyebrow. Perhaps he knows these are not reigns like those of kings whose buildings still stand in his own city. Perhaps he understands them as solemn measures of a vanished order. His task is not to protest that no man lives so long. His task is to preserve the proper architecture of memory. The list does not remain impossible forever. Once the flood has passed, kingship descends again, this time in Kish. The reigns remain lengthy at first, with rulers assigned centuries rather than ordinary lifetimes. Gradually, the numbers become more recognizable. In the deeper historical portions, rulers of cities such as Ur are assigned reigns measured in decades, close to the span expected of living men who build temples, command labor, wage wars, grow old, and die. One name provides a firm foothold. Enmebaragesi of Kish appears within the king list, and his name is also known from inscriptions belonging to the ancient world itself. Here, the mist of legendary kingship begins touching material history. A ruler who stands within the list also leaves evidence beyond its literary arrangement. The clay story and the excavated world meet, not perfectly, but closely enough to make the boundary fascinating. That boundary trembles beneath your attention. On one side stand kings whose reigns fill tens of thousands of years. On the other stand rulers whose names appear upon objects and inscriptions created during ancient political life. Between them lies a gradual shortening of time, as though sacred memory is descending step by step toward ordinary human scale. No single moment announces the change. There is no sign saying that myth ends here and history begins now. Ancient memory is not arranged for modern convenience. Legendary rulers, divine associations, genuine cities, political claims, remembered conflicts, and scribal patterns rest together upon the same clay surface. The prism is not confused by their companionship. It belongs to a culture comfortable with history, carrying sacred depth. Some modern enthusiasts take the great reign lengths literally. They suggest that the first rulers possessed extended lifespans, unusual biology, or technologies unavailable to ordinary people. Others attempt to divide the numbers until they produce ordinary human reigns, hoping to recover a hidden practical chronology. Such efforts have a certain puzzle-solving charm. Still, the prism gives no medical explanation, no device for preserving life, and no instruction that its earliest numbers should be converted into modern biography. The mystery lies elsewhere. Scholars continue to debate precisely why the king list was composed and revised. Some read it as an argument that only one city at a time rightfully held kingship over the land. Others emphasize its mixture of religious tradition and political memory, shaped to make present rule appear part of a sacred succession. Not every surviving copy includes the same opening sequence, and variation warns against treating the composition as a simple archive of literal events. You turn the prism once more. A line of tiny signs catches the flame, then slips away as another face appears. The kings remain there, still seated within durations wider than entire civilizations. They do not explain themselves. They do not step from the clay to defend their years. Their silence is part of their authority. Outside, a city sleeps beneath the stars. Low houses rest beside narrow lanes. Somewhere, a watchman clears his throat. Somewhere, an old wall gives a small dry crack as the night cools its bricks. Ordinary human time passes quietly, heartbeat by heartbeat, lamp by lamp, season by season. Yet in the scribe's preserved world, kingship remembers another rhythm. It remembers rulers who stand at the far shore of measured life, governing cities whose names survive while their immense ages remain unreachable. Their reigns are not proof of forgotten species. They are something more delicate and unsettling evidence that the first urban civilizations looked backward and saw authority disappearing into sacred time. The prism rests again beneath the lamp. Its clay surface carries the calmest, impossible numbers you have ever seen. And as darkness gathers around its four inscribed sides, the earliest kings seem neither alive nor dead, but suspended in the long twilight where memory first begins to call itself history. The reading room carries a different kind of silence. There are no priests moving through smoke, no laborers standing beside wet channels, no king hidden within the measures of sacred time. Here, beneath tall windows and shelves crowded with books, men and women lean over photographs, copied signs, dictionaries, and small clay objects placed upon padded supports. The mystery has acquired pencils. You sit beside a scholar whose fingertips are stained with graphite rather than mud. A magnifying lens rests near one elbow. A lamp throws clean light across the face of a tablet. At first glance, its signs seem almost decorative. Rows of tiny impressions arranged with severe patience. Then the reader murmurs a syllable, pauses, corrects it, and a voice from an ancient city moves quietly into the room. That movement required centuries of effort. Cuneiform writing was not read by modern scholars simply because someone found a tablet and stared at it with unusual concentration. The script carried several languages across long ages, including Sumerian and Akkadian, with signs capable of holding sounds, words, and learned associations. To recover meaning, researchers compared inscriptions, bilingual lists, repeated formulas, royal names, grammatical patterns, and thousands upon thousands of patient details. A sign is rarely lonely. It belongs to the signs beside it, to the language using it, to the period when it was written, and to the habits of the scribe who shaped it. One wedge placed in a slightly altered position can disturb an entire reading. A name that seems clear in an enthusiastic book may become less secure under museum light, where the damaged surface refuses to support an exciting conclusion. You hear pages turning softly. In the 19th century, the British Museum became one of the great stages upon which Mesopotamia returned to modern attention. In 1872, George Smith announced his reading of a Babylonian flood account from the tablets of Nineveh. The discovery startled Victorian audiences because it revealed a flood narrative from ancient Mesopotamia with striking similarities to a far more familiar sacred story. Clay from an unfamiliar world suddenly seemed able to speak directly into modern arguments about faith, origins, and memory. An amusing tale follows Smith through history. A contemporary report claimed that, on recognizing the flood passage, he became so overcome with excitement that he rushed about the room and began removing parts of his clothing. Whether every detail is perfectly reliable hardly matters to the charm of the image. Ancient literature finally breaks its silence, and the respectable scholar briefly forgets how waistcoats work. Excitement is not the enemy. Without passion, many damaged tablets would still rest unread in drawers. Scholars must care enough to spend years studying a single literary tradition, tracing one divine name through variant spellings and scattered fragments. Archaeologists must care enough to record the dullest soil layers, because an ordinary floor or rubbish pit can explain more than a magnificent object removed without context. The difficulty begins when excitement outruns the clay. On one side of the reading room stand specialists in Sumerian language, archaeology, religion, and history. They ask careful questions. What signs truly survive on this surface? What language is present? Is the tablet an early composition, a school copy, or a later learned adaptation? Does a divine name indicate a character, a title, a place, or a scribal tradition preserved with slight alterations? On the other side gathers a different company. They enter with diagrams of stars, sketches of strange machines, and lists of beings arranged into a secret history. They speak of hidden rulers, altered human bodies, vanished settlements, celestial visitors, and knowledge suppressed by cautious institutions. Their world is rich in answers. Every damaged surface becomes suspicious. Every symbolic being becomes physical. Every uncertainty is treated as a curtain deliberately drawn across forbidden truth. It is easy to understand the appeal. A museum label rarely offers the thrill of a hidden cosmic dynasty. Scholarly phrasing can feel painfully modest. A curator may say that an image probably represents a protective divine creature within a ritual context. A mystic narrator prefers to tell you that an eyewitness carved the last surviving portrait of an extinct intelligent species. One explanation asks patience. The other gives you gooseflesh before bedtime. Yet patience has its own beauty. You watch the scholar copy several signs onto paper. She does not force them into an extraordinary confession. She allows one reading to remain doubtful. She compares a duplicate tablet, consults an old lexical list, and notes that a figure described as divine in one composition may serve a different literary purpose elsewhere. Her caution is not an attempt to conceal wonder. It is a form of respect for people whose words cannot correct the living. Ancient writers deserve that courtesy. They inhabited a world in which gods, sages, demons, kings, monsters, rituals, diseases, dreams, and political power touched one another without following modern categories. A figure could be real within worship without being a biological organism. A guardian could protect a door through its sacred image without having nested upon a rooftop. A divine genealogy could explain authority without recording the breeding history of physical populations. The modern phrase, 5 species, makes the old material sound tidy. The tablets themselves are less obedient. They preserve differing beings within differing genres myths, lists, incantations, royal traditions, protective art, and learned reflections upon remote time. Drawing 5 groupings from that material can create a compelling journey through ancient imagination. Claiming the scribes recorded 5 scientific species requires evidence their surviving writings do not provide. That distinction is quiet, but essential. Scholars still dispute how inherited stories moved between Sumerian compositions and later Akkadian traditions, how temple schools reshaped older ideas, and how ordinary worshippers understood learned divine figures. Some interpretations emphasize continuity across centuries. Others stress transformation, local variation, and the creativity of scribes who did more than copy inherited material. The clay preserves tradition, but tradition is never perfectly still. A scent of wax smoke drifts through the room. Outside, rain touches the window glass in delicate taps. Within the pool of lamplight, a small seal impression shows a figure standing near an emblem. Another viewer might see an alien commander. Another might see only attractive decoration. The trained reader searches for comparison, context, and the habits of ancient craftsmen. She knows imagination is useful, but only when it walks beside evidence rather than dragging evidence behind it. A curious exchange has taken place across time. Ancient people looked toward remote beginnings and filled them with sacred figures who explained labor, wisdom, kingship, protection, and loss. Modern people look toward those sacred figures and sometimes fill them with their own anxieties about technology, hidden power, manipulation, and vanished worlds. Each age seeks itself in the darkness. Each finds shapes that feel familiar. The clay remains more restrained than either dream. It tells you that Mesopotamians believed human life existed inside a vast sacred arrangement. It tells you their world contained powers older, stranger, and more authoritative than ordinary mortals. It tells you that memory could be broken by catastrophe, carried through writing, and reshaped by those who inherited it. But the tablet does not surrender every secret placed upon it. The scholar closes her notebook. The lamp still shines upon the rows of wedges, each sign small, deliberate, and calm. Around you, the reading room settles deeper into evening, holding its arguments, its hopes, its mistaken certainties, and its rare moments of genuine recovery. You understand that mystery does not need careless proof. Sometimes the more unsettling truth is that an ancient civilization created a world filled with vanished presences and left you enough evidence to feel their nearness, but never enough to force them into one final shape. Night gathers upon the city in layers. First, the sun leaves the upper walls. Then the courtyards soften into blue shadow. Then the last bronze glimmer fades from a temple door. Small lamps begin appearing behind reed screens. Their flames are modest, yet together they give the settlement the appearance of stars lowered gently onto earth. You move along a narrow lane, Under your feet, the brickwork is warm from the day. From a nearby house comes the scent of lentils, onion, and bread lifted carefully from an oven. Someone rinses a bowl beside a water jar. Somewhere farther off, a baby protests sleep with admirable determination, while an older voice answers in patient whispers. This is the human world. It is fragile, practical, and busy with small continuities. Yet in the sacred imagination shaped upon clay, it stands upon a succession of absences. The world does not belong to humanity because nothing existed beforehand. It belongs to humanity because older presences have withdrawn, been displaced, ceased their labor, delivered their knowledge, or settled forever into signs carved above thresholds. 5 disappearances leave 1 inhabited city. The first fading is almost impossible to notice because it occurs at the height of existence itself. The primeval powers do not fall screaming from heaven. They become foundations. Their distance gives the sky authority, gives the earth patience, gives hidden water its depth. They disappear from closeness, retreating into the vast conditions beneath which every human roof is built. You look upward. Above the flat houses, stars appear one by one, each distant enough to seem permanent. No family owns them. No priest can bring them down. Their remoteness feels like the remoteness of first things. Powers less absent than unreachable, still necessary precisely because they are no longer near. The second fading has the character of inheritance. Older rulers slip behind younger authority, their names retained in learned lists, their power remembered through ceremony, their former claims settled into the quiet ground below visible worship. Their disappearance teaches that rule never arrives without an older silence beneath it. A human king understands such silence. He sits upon a raised seat, perhaps dressed in wool edged with costly color, while servants carry vessels and petitioners wait for judgment. His authority appears immediate, expressed in seal, staff, guard, and command. Yet every throne rests upon those who no longer occupy it. Every ruler governs among the faint footsteps of predecessors. Even pride must borrow a room already filled with ghosts. The third fading is harder, because it leaves a burden behind. Those who once labored cease to carry the baskets. The mud still requires lifting. Channels still require clearing. Grain still requires sowing, harvesting, grinding, counting, and storing. The work does not disappear with those who reject it. Instead, it crosses a boundary and settles into mortal shoulders. You pause beside a courtyard. A young man returns from canal work, washing his hands in a basin while dried clay loosens from his wrists. His mother places bread before him. His sister laughs at the line of mud remaining across his cheek. Nothing about this little scene looks cosmic. Yet within the old stories, his tired hands belong to a vast transfer of duty. The ordinary evening meal is shaped by labor inherited from a divine refusal. Perhaps civilization is always inherited work. The fourth fading leaves something less heavy, but no less demanding. Wisdom arrives, teaches, organizes, warns, measures, and then ceases to be visibly accompanied by its giver. The human world receives skills without keeping the first teacher beside it. Knowledge becomes tradition, then training, then habit, then something so ordinary that its original strangeness is almost forgotten. In a small room, a scribe bends above damp clay. He calculates quantities of barley owed to workers attached to an estate. His columns are clean and balanced. Administrative archives from ancient Mesopotamian cities preserve thousands of such records. revealing how completely writing became woven into the management of grain, animals, textiles, offerings, and labor. A tool once surrounded by sacred wonder now serves the daily demands of organized life. That is the curious fate of wisdom. The miraculous eventually becomes paperwork. The sacred gift of signs is used to note missing sheep, delayed barley, and jars requiring delivery. One can admire humanity for receiving the mysteries of ordered communication, then immediately using them to complain that someone has not supplied enough wool. Still, this is no decline. To inherit knowledge means to make it ordinary enough to survive. A lesson that remains miraculous may be admired for one generation. A lesson turned into routine can feed cities for centuries. The vanished giver leaves no greater proof of success than people performing the skill without pausing to ask where it first began. The fifth fading stands quietly at the edge of every valued place. The guardian does not abandon protection. It abandons motion. Its body becomes image. Its strength becomes carving. Its warning becomes a seal pressed into clay or a gleaming form attached to sacred furniture. It no longer needs breath, because its task has entered the minds of those approaching the doorway. A merchant seals a storage jar. The little impression marks ownership, control, and trust. A temple official closes a storeroom where grain waits for measured distribution. A family hangs a protective object near an entrance, hoping illness and misfortune will pass elsewhere. Human beings inherit not the monster itself, but the need it answered the longing to make a vulnerable boundary safer. 5 kinds of absence now surround you. Origins become distance. Old authority becomes ancestry. Labor becomes obligation. Wisdom becomes custom. Protection becomes symbol. None of these vanishings resembles the neat ending of an extinct animal observed for the last time near a drying waterhole. They are transformations within meaning, each leaving behind something humanity must carry. This is the pattern hidden in the clay. Human beings inherit a world already structured by what has receded from it. They walk on ground belonging to first powers, obey arrangements shaped by older authority, undertake work once assigned elsewhere, practice arts whose first teachers cannot be summoned, and sleep behind thresholds guarded by images of impossible strength. A quirky truth follows naturally from this inheritance. Mesopotamian households could protect themselves through small objects, spoken formulas, figurines, and carefully arranged rituals meant to turn away unseen trouble. A family living within one of history's earliest urban worlds might possess advanced accounting, complex temples, and legal agreements, then still place quiet trust in a protective presence near a doorway. Civilization has never cured the night of being dark. Scholars continue to discuss whether these layers of sacred thought formed a connected vision for ancient listeners, or whether modern readers are joining traditions once experienced separately. Temple specialists may have seen patterns invisible to an ordinary brewer or shepherd. A household may have known a protective figure intimately while caring little for the learned ancestry of great gods. The surviving evidence allows structure to be traced, but not every ancient mind to be entered. You walk toward the city edge. Behind you, lamps mark homes, workshops, and sacred rooms. Before you, cultivated plots fade toward marsh and darkness. The air smells faintly of herbs crushed beneath a sandal, with cooler water somewhere beyond the fields. You hear a gate being closed for the night, wood settling firmly into its socket. Humanity remains awake inside the walls, not because it defeated every presence that came first, not because it uncovered every mystery or understood every name impressed into clay. It remains because absence created responsibility. A world once occupied by older powers has become a world tended by mortal hands, watched by mortal eyes, remembered through mortal stories. Perhaps inheritance is never comfortable. It brings fields to cultivate and names to preserve. It brings roofs needing repair, children needing instruction, thresholds needing care, and questions without answers. It also brings lamplight, warm bread, written signs, patient skill, and the ability to look into darkness without demanding that darkness surrender entirely. The city settles beneath the stars. Within its walls, human breath rises and falls, carrying the faint weight of all that is no longer visible. No vanished presence returns to reclaim its place. No final tablet explains the arrangement completely. There is only the quiet inheritance, resting in human hands. A faint chill touches the museum glass as the last visitors disappear from the gallery. The polished floor no longer carries footsteps. Security lights glow softly along distant walls, leaving the oldest objects in pools of amber quiet. Before you, the tablets sit where they have rested through another day, their surfaces bearing the marks of people who trusted clay to carry remembrance beyond breath. Nothing here demands belief. A broken tablet does not call out from its case. A seal does not move beneath its careful lighting. A small fragment of writing, numbered and catalogued, asks only to be seen for what it is, earth-shaped by a human hand, marked with signs, fired or dried, buried, lifted again, and placed inside a world its maker could never have imagined. Your reflection trembles upon the glass. Behind it, the clay appears almost weightless. Yet these fragments carry entire landscapes, temple courts bright with sun, marsh channels humming with insects, storage rooms smelling of barley, scribal desks touched by lamplight, and rivers whose changing moods could nourish a city or silence it. They preserve no tidy revelation. They preserve the ancient habit of searching for order inside a world that never promised permanence. This is the truth, hidden most carefully. The tablets did not conceal 5 creatures waiting to be rediscovered as specimens. They preserved several kinds of presence through which early people understood existence beginnings too distant to approach. Authority older than memory. Work handed from one bearer to another. Wisdom received from beyond ordinary life. And protection imagined at every dangerous boundary. Their disappearance does not require a grave. A presence may vanish because its name is spoken less often. It may disappear because its function has passed into human custom. It may become distant enough to seem like origin rather than companion. It may remain fixed in an image while the worship surrounding that image grows silent. It may survive inside a story, although no listener now hears that story exactly as its first audience heard it. The gallery remains deeply still. In the 19th and 20th centuries, archaeologists working in Iraq uncovered tablets in immense numbers from cities including Nippur, Ur, and ancient settlements across the southern plain. Institutions such as the University of Pennsylvania Museum and the University of Chicago helped preserve and study these materials, allowing voices from early urban life to be read again with disciplined care. Their discoveries did not reveal a secret catalog of lost biological peoples. They revealed something more human, a civilization asking who had arranged the world, why people carried burdens, and what remained when order failed. Such questions do not become old. You feel them even now, standing beneath electric light with no reed boat tied outside, no offering bowl in your hand, and no temple official urging you toward ceremony. Modern surroundings have made many things easier. Water emerges from a tap. A message crosses oceans before a lamp would have finished burning. Accounts are kept without a stylus pressing wedges into wet clay. Yet the great uncertainties remain remarkably faithful. Why are you here? What has been inherited without your consent? Which lessons came from voices you can no longer name? What unseen fears still guard the doorway of your own private thoughts? Humanity has acquired remarkable tools, but the night continues to invite the oldest questions with very little effort. A small object catches your eye in the neighboring case. It is a clay school tablet, the work of a learner rather than a king. The signs are uneven. One line has been corrected. Perhaps the student was young. Perhaps the teacher sighed heavily. Perhaps, having practiced a difficult sequence, the learner stepped outside into sunlight and forgot the whole exhausting matter until the following morning. There is comfort in that imperfect clay. Among myths of cosmic arrangement and vanished powers, an ordinary hand remains visible. Someone struggled to write correctly. Someone left behind evidence not of divine contact, but of concentration, impatience, and instruction. Thousands of years later, this quiet failure may seem more intimate than any royal boast. It reminds you that history survives not only through extraordinary claims, but through people attempting ordinary tasks with mixed success. The most curious fragment may not be the one describing a god. It may be the one revealing a mistake. Scholars continue to debate how far the surviving texts represent popular belief. Learned temple interpretation, political invention, or the changing imagination of scribes across generations. A composition copied in one city may carry emphasis absent elsewhere. A figure remembered as ancient in one tradition may acquire a different role in another. Even careful reading does not return the vanished world whole. It opens a doorway, then leaves much of the room in shadow. That shadow should not disappoint you. A completely solved past would be flat and strangely lifeless. It would resemble a labeled cabinet, useful perhaps, but without the breath of uncertainty that makes old places feel inhabited. The Sumerian records offer firm ground where firm ground exists clay objects, ancient writing, named cities, sacred traditions, floods remembered in literature, kings arranged across impossible time, and beliefs shaped around labor, wisdom, rule, and protection. Beyond that ground lies interpretation. You are allowed to wonder there, provided wonder does not disguise itself as proof. Perhaps a priest in an ancient sanctuary understood a divine figure in ways no modern reader can recover. Perhaps a household heard a tale beside a dim lamp, then repeated it with details now lost forever. Perhaps a child saw an image of a winged guardian and felt the same mixture of fear and reassurance that an old carved face can still awaken tonight. The darkness does not need invention to become deep. You move slowly toward the final case. Inside lies a tablet whose lines are interrupted by damage. The first signs are clear, the middle surface scarred, the ending partially lost. It resembles a path vanishing beneath wind-blown sand. You know that somewhere within the missing portions there may once have been words explaining an action, naming an offering, continuing a list, or completing a prayer. There may also have been nothing astonishing at all. That possibility feels almost tender now. Not every silence is hiding a forbidden answer. Some silences are simply what time does. Clay breaks. Buildings collapse. Rivers alter their beds. Libraries scatter. Languages fade from living mouths. Even the greatest stories must travel through accidents, neglect, war, weather, excavation, translation, and the fragile patience of strangers. A civilization speaks, then waits to be misunderstood. The old scribes could not foresee the questions placed upon their work. They did not know that future listeners would arrange their sacred beings into vanished categories, searching for a history older than humanity. They wrote within their own uncertainty, among their own rivers and duties, their own sacred fears and consoling rituals. Their records reveal not a secret answer waiting beneath every broken line, but a human longing to understand a world already filled with loss. The gallery lights dim slightly. Your own face fades from the glass, leaving the tablet clearer for a moment. It seems smaller than it did when the evening began, and far more precious. Not because it has surrendered the identity of every ancient presence, nor because it proves that strange beings once inhabited the earth before human feet touched mud. It is precious because it remains unfinished. It carries a little knowledge across an enormous darkness, enough to show that people once stood beside dangerous waters, lifted their eyes toward distant powers, shaped meaning from work and disaster, and pressed their questions into clay before returning to silence. You step away from the case, behind you. The tablet rests beneath its careful light, broken but not voiceless, silent but not empty. Its missing lines remain open, holding no certainty that can be forced from them, only the deep and restful understanding that the past is allowed to keep some portion of itself, and perhaps, in that protected darkness, the oldest truth is still waiting without needing to be found. Wind down. The museum is quiet now, and the night beyond its walls has softened every sharp edge of the city. You no longer need to read each mark upon the clay. You no longer need to arrange every name, every shadow, every vanished shape into a final answer. The tablets have rested for thousands of years without hurry, and they can rest a little longer. Let the lamp grow dim in your mind. Let the river plain become silver beneath moonlight, its channels moving gently between sleeping reeds. Far away, a temple wall cools after the heat of day. A door closes softly. A small household settles into peace. Bowls washed, bread covered. Children finally quiet beneath woven blankets. Nothing approaches through the darkness. The ancient watchers remain in their carved stillness. The distant powers remain distant. The broken lines remain safely broken, no longer demanding that you complete them tonight. There is only the slow breath of the land, the faint movement of water, and the patient clay holding memories that do not need to trouble your sleep. You have walked among questions older than kingdoms. You have listened to a world in which human beings arrive gently, carrying duties, hopes, fears, and the strange gift of remembering. Now even those questions may drift away, one by one, like lamps disappearing along a quiet canal. The stars above the plain are soft and countless. The last museum light goes out, and perhaps the story is not yet complete.